Hello everyone, my name is Priya and I welcome you all back to my channel. I hope you all are doing great. In the last video, we discussed about Article 44, that is Uniform Civil Code for the Citizens. If you haven't seen that video yet, then the link is given in the description box. In today's video, we will be discussing about Article 45. As per the categorization of articles of DPSP, Article 45 comes under liberal intellectual principles. Article 45 talks about provision for free and compulsory education for children. It used to say, the state shall endeavour to provide within a period of 10 years from the commencement of this constitution for free and compulsory education for all children until they complete the age of 14 years. Free education means no child shall be responsible to pay any kind of fee or charges which may prevent him or her from completing primary education. And compulsory education means it is kind of duty or responsibility of government to provide admission, attendance and completion of primary education. So this simply means that the state shall make an effort to provide free and compulsory education for children between 0 to 14 years of age. This is what Article 45 basically talks about. But while adding this article to the Indian Constitution, for the very first time, the founding fathers of the Constituent Assembly had set a time limit for the states to take action on this particular thing. That time limit was of 10 years. As you can see, it is mentioned in the article that within a period of 10 years from the commencement of the Constitution. Commencement date is 26th January 1950, the date on which Constitution of India was legally enforced. And within 10 years from that date, that is by the year 1960, state had to take steps towards providing free and compulsory education for children between 0 to 14 years of age. Article 45 was the only article for which the framers of the Constitution had fixed a time limit for its implementation. No other article had such time limit. So doing this was showing how important it was to provide at least primary education to children at that time. But if it was so important to implement, then why was this provision not inserted in Part 3 of the Indian Constitution as fundamental right? It would have been more effective, right? Try to understand this. The provision of Article 45 talked about free and compulsory education. And if the government is providing something for free, then the government has to be economically strong, right? And we all know that how economically weak our country was after independence. So if this provision, that is provision of free and compulsory education, was given the status of a fundamental right, then the difficulties of the government would have increased because fundamental rights are legally enforceable in the court. And that's why the provision of free and compulsory education was inserted in Part 4 of the Indian Constitution as DPSP, instead of making it a fundamental right. And realizing the need of primary education in the country, the Constitution makers mentioned a time limit that is of 10 years in Article 45 for its implementation. so that the government should take some action on education as soon as possible. So after the commencement of the constitution, 3 different 5-year plans were launched by the government. But despite all the plans, due to unavailability of resources and finance, the governments could not make this dream reality for many further decades. It was not that the government didn't try. They tried, but the development was not being met to the extent it was supposed to. So by the end of third 5-year plan, that is in the year 1964, a commission called Kothari Commission was formed by the Indian government, headed by Daulat Singh Kothari. This commission was formed to review the status of education in India and to check why previous plans launched by the government failed. In the year 1966, the Kothari Commission submitted its report with some important recommendations like free and compulsory education, status and education of teacher, education for social, moral and spiritual values, education for social and national integration, education for international understanding, common school system. This means schools for children irrespective of caste, creed, community and economic or social status. 3-language formula, equalization of educational opportunity, that is free supply of books, notebooks, providing scholarships, etc. And a lot more recommendations were given by the Kothari Commission. So based on the report and recommendations of the Kothari Commission, in the year 1968, the first national policy on education was announced by then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, in which the main focus was equal educational opportunities, compulsory education for all children up to 14 years of age, specialized training and qualification of teachers, implementing 3-language formula, that is Hindi, English and the official language of any particular state. The policy also encouraged teaching of Sanskrit language. So with this policy, the government tried to improve the quality of education in India. In the year 1975, that is during emergency, 42nd Amendment Act of 1976 was passed. By that amendment, the subject of education was transferred from state list to concurrent list. This means earlier the subject of education was only for states, but after 42nd Amendment Act, this subject was for both states and the centre. In the year 1986, under Prime Ministership of Rajiv Gandhi, second national policy on education was introduced, in which main focus was to equalize educational opportunities, especially for women, scheduled tribe and scheduled caste communities. The government also launched Operation Blackboard to improve primary schools. Again in the year 1990, a committee called Acharya Rammurti Committee was constituted to review the second national policy on education of 1986. So based on the recommendations given by this committee, in the year 1992, the second national policy on education was modified by then Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao. The Acharya Rammurti Committee gave a very important recommendation that the right to education should be included as a fundamental right in Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. However, this recommendation was not implemented immediately. So if you see, Whichever governments came to power, they tried their best to improve education system in India. But despite so many efforts, the government failed immensely in finance, logistics, and overall implementation. Now moving forward, in the year 1992, Mohini Jain vs. State of Karnataka, and in the year 1993, Unni Krishnan JP vs. State of Andhra Pradesh case, the Supreme Court of India held a very important judgment. In the judgment, Supreme Court held that the right to education is associated to fundamental rights contained in Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. Supreme Court clarified that though right to education is not stated directly as a fundamental right, but it is derived from the right to life guaranteed under Article 21. As Article 21 talks about right to life and personal liberty, which somehow includes right to education too, because education is required for the overall development, without which one would not be able to enjoy one's right to life. But right after the judgment of this case, several PIL petitions were filed in different high courts to make an amendment in the constitution to include the right to education as a separate fundamental right. And that's why, after a lot of efforts and a lot of failures, finally in the year 2002, the 86th Constitutional Amendment Act was passed. By this amendment, three major changes were done to the Indian Constitution. Number 1. Article 21A was inserted in Part 3 of the Indian Constitution as a new fundamental right, which stated that the state shall provide free and compulsory education to all children of the age of 6 to 14 years in such manner as the state may by law determine. So by adding this article, it mandated the state to provide free and compulsory education to children belonging to the age group of 6 to 14 years. And because this article was a fundamental right, it was enforceable in the court. The second change was made in Article 45. So far, we have seen that Article 45 talks about providing free and compulsory education for children between 0 to 14 years of age. But after the insertion of Article 21A, the age group of children mentioned in Article 45 has been changed from 0 to 14 years to 0 to 6 years. So which means Article 45 provided provision of free and compulsory education for children between 0 to 6 years, and Article 21A for children between 6 to 14 years of age. Right? Now the third change that was made by 86th Amendment Act was in Article 51A. Article 51A comes under Part 4A of the Indian Constitution, which talks about fundamental duties of the citizens. Part 4A along with Article 51A was added by 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976. When this part was added, total 10 fundamental duties were inserted in Article 51A, which we will discuss later when we will be doing fundamental duties. Right now we are talking about changes done to Article 51A by 86th Amendment. As I said, earlier 10 fundamental duties were in Article 51A, that is from Clause A to Clause J. But by 86th Amendment Act, one more fundamental duty was added to Article 51A, that is Clause K. By adding clause K, it was said that along with the state, it is also duty of parents or guardians to provide education to their children of 6 to 14 years of age. So these three major changes were done to the Indian Constitution by 86th Amendment Act of 2002. Article 21A as a fundamental right, Article 45 as a DPSP, and Article 51 Clause K as a fundamental duty. Article 21A is legally enforceable in the court as it is a fundamental right, whereas Article 45 and Article 51A are not legally enforceable in the court. To give effect to the provision of Article 21A, an act was passed by the government in the year 2009, that is, the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act 2009, which came into force from 1st April 2010. If we talk about national policy, then you might have heard about National Policy of Education 2020, which is the most recent one. So after independence, 4 times National Policy on Education has been launched by the government. For the very first time, it was launched in the year 1968 under Prime Ministership of Indira Gandhi. Second time, its modified version was launched in the year 1986 under Prime Ministership of Rajiv Gandhi. Third time, another modification of 1986 policy was launched in the year 1992 under Prime Ministership of P.V. Narasimha Rao. And fourth time, National Policy on Education was launched in the year 2020 under Prime Ministership of Narendra Modi, which is the most recent one. So that was all about Article 45 from my side. I hope this video will help you to understand the evolution of education in India. I'll see you in the next video with another article. Till then, thank you so much for watching this video.